So, welcome to May's online plum tree meeting. The theme of tonight's meeting is Backyard Astronomy, and I'm grateful to everyone who's submitted videos and images. It's been really good. I'm also very grateful to Lee for doing all the video editing and putting all the clips together and normalizing the sound and color and things. So that's great. Thank you to Lee. We're likely to run another online plum tree meeting, which includes clips from our members. So please do contact me if you're happy to help out with this. The next GOTUM meeting is on online GOTUM meeting is on Thursday the 4th of June, and we've got a talk by Ian Morrison on the wonders of the southern skies. So on with tonight's talks. We'll be around at the end of the talks if there are any questions, which you can submit through the chat feature on YouTube. You can do that during the talks or afterwards, and we'll try and answer those after the talk or do that in the journal subsequently. Right, let's see what our members have been up to.
Hello, this is my observatory. It's in the back garden of my home in Langer in Nottinghamshire, and I built it about 12 years ago. Actually, I bought the dome itself and the track that it runs on from a UK firm called Pulsar, but I mounted it on an 8-foot square shed that I made myself from plywood and timber. Now, having stood in the elements for 12 years, that flat roof shed is showing serious signs of deterioration, and a project in the near future would be to replace it. One idea would be to buy myself a complete glass fibre observatory, totally weatherproof, which would mean getting rid of this particular dome. If anyone watching this video is interested, I would be willing to let the dome go relatively cheap in order to start to finance my new observatory. So we've opened the shutter of the dome, and looking inside, there's my telescope. It's a Newtonian reflector made by Orion Optics UK. It's got a 30 centimetre diameter main mirror, which is just shy of a foot, and its focal ratio is f5.3. So it's a fairly large instrument and fills most of the dome. On the other hand, I have managed to get 4 or 5 other people as well as myself inside at times in order for us to have a look out at the stars. Well, now we're looking inside the observatory, and we can see that the telescope is mounted on a German equatorial mount. It's actually a Vixen GPDX mounting, and it has a go-to kit called Arnova. Inside the observatory is the essential step ladder, and you can also see one reason why I opted for an 8-foot square shed to mount the dome on, because it gives extra space. So I have a desk over there for storing eyepieces, etc. I also have a desk where I can sit and make notes, and so it gives quite a lot more space. Up at the top end of the telescope you can see the focusing mount and the finder telescope attached to the side. As regard eyepieces, I have a range of them, from the 6.3mm focal length colossal eyepiece on the left to the wide-angle moonfish eyepiece on the right. The smaller eyepiece is a standard 1¼ diameter eyepiece, and the larger one is a standard 2". And so, to round off, I'd like to show you a selection of images that I've taken over the past few years through the 30 centimetre telescope.
Hello, this is Herbal. It's a Saturday evening, 25th of April, and I'm going to take a look at the moon, maybe Venus as well. It's about 8 o'clock in the evening, so it's not very dark at the moment. I'll just show you my telescope first. So this is my telescope setup. It's a Nexstar SE6SE, and I've got a 40mm eyepiece at the moment, and I'm going to attach it to this camera so I can see if I can take a picture. I have tried before, but not very good images really. And I've also taken images of Venus as well. You can probably see them in the sky, not very clearly. Yeah, just about there. You can see a bit of the moon there. It's been an interesting few weeks with this lockdown, and we've had a really good weather and quite a clear sky. So I took the opportunity to get my telescope out a few times and observe the skies. As you're probably aware, it was basically Venus was very prominent in the last couple of months. So I thought I'd try and take photographs of Venus. Just to tell you about my equipment, I acquired a Nexstar 6SE on a alt azimuth mount last year. It was a second hand, so I had some issues. One was the software was out of date, which I needed to get a USB FTDI cable to update it, which I fortunately managed to do on my Mac. Also, I borrowed John's eyepieces and had a look at them, see what sort of would be get the best view. And I recently acquired a Beta Hyperion 13mm, as I already had a 25mm eyepiece with a camera with the telescope. I also bought a fine-tuning ring, so you could actually improve the magnification down to I think it was around about 9mm. And I got a Barlow lens adapter as well, which would I can come down to about 7.5 with that.
Hi, good evening. I'm Brendan. The date is the 24th of April and the time is 8:25 in the evening, and this is me in my observatory at home in Nottingham. I'm currently standing in a 2.2 metre diameter pulsar observatory that I've had for just over a year now. In it I have housed my 5-inch Apo astronomical refractor that is mounted on a NEQ6 equatorial mount here on a pier, and as you probably can see in the background there is my laptop with a little crescent phase of a planet on it, and that is the planet Venus at the moment. And as I'm sure you all know, at this time of year Venus is quite spectacular high up in the west after sunset, and is currently exhibiting a lovely crescent phase, and day by day the planet Venus is actually getting bigger in the sky, and it's fantastic to see with all this good clear weather we're getting. And at the moment I've got a live feed through a ZWO 120mm mono camera that's coupled to a x5 PowerMate, which in turn is actually fed into this 952mm refractor, which is a 5-inch diameter objective. So what we'll do is I'll just whip around the side of the observatory and just show you what I'm currently imaging at the moment. So here we have the planet Venus through the 120mm ZWO camera, and as you can see it's a lovely crescent phase, quite a bit of atmospheric disturbance there, not too surprising because it's not too long after sunset and setting in the west. Okay, so I hope to get a decent image out of that later. Just take around here. And as we can see, this is the bad boy ZWO 120mm camera, small little device, small chip, x5 PowerMate here, again coupled to the 5-inch refractor. Okay, so it's been a lovely sunny day, but I'm kitted up for the night.
Hello, this is a video about an observatory, but it doesn't explain how to build one. It doesn't really do very much except let you have a look at my observatory, or as it turned out, it's usually called the hut. So don't expect to learn too much, but you may just find a few things of interest. If you get bored, listen to the birds. They're much better than I am. I'm just setting up a Meade LX90 8-inch to try and do a little bit of observing later in the evening. It's on an equatorial wedge, and because it's also on a tripod, this means that every time I use it, it has to be polar aligned, which is a bit of a nuisance. But if you look in the background, I do have an answer to it when the emergency vehicles have gone. The observatory at the back, or the hut as it's known, you can see there the roof has been slid back and it's ready to use immediately. This is my hut or observatory, seen from the lawn. You can see where the roll-off roof goes onto on the left-hand side, and also probably the trees roundabout that I use to try and obscure it. This is the only other view you can really get of the hut, showing the door, trees to the left, and general surroundings. You can also see that I've made life interesting by running a garden railway across in front of the door. Nothing like making life interesting when it gets dark. This is the view of the hut with the roof open. I can move slowly forward, and I've put the lights on so that you can get a general impression. The lights are not normally on as brightly as this, but it does help so you can see what it looks like. This is the interior of the hut, showing as usual junk all over the floor. Not really junk, but classified. There's my homemade mount, all of it except the part right on top. and there you can see the telescope. This is where the pillar mount appears through the floor. You can probably just about see that it is separated from the floor to avoid any vibration. The tube is just a concrete pipe, a pipe filled with concrete, and the mount to connect the telescope to it is homemade. It's very important that you isolate the pillar from the floor, because otherwise the amount of vibration would be amazing, and it's difficult enough to keep things still even with a concrete pillar. And this one is quite long, but when I worked it all out, this is the height it had to be. This is the hut with the roof off, and you can see rather more clearly how it was built inside, and the fact that I have lights, red lights in various places. This is the view looking over towards Nottingham with some lovely clouds. Coming round to the south, pretty well unobstructed, all the way round, now in the east, and to the north, but strangely enough there's nothing much I want to look at in the north. This is the observatory with the roof rolled off, and you can see that it's fairly Heath Robinson, but everything holds up, and I can move the roof back with basically one hand. What is a garden or a hut without a railway running around it? It just seems to make everything look something as it should be to me. There's also a pond that's ready to catch unwary astronomers when they go out at night. So in addition to having to step over a railway, you also have to get past the pond. I've managed so far without you having to look at me while I talk, but I just thought I'd do this for summing it up. In my opinion, astronomy, like any other hobby, is either fun or it isn't worth bothering about. I think that having a hut with a sliding roof makes it fun again, because you can go out on a cold night, slide the roof off, start observing, and when you've finished and you feel more like having a cup of tea or something, you just slide the roof back on and leave the clearing up till tomorrow.
You can see a picture of the outside of the observatory. It has a run-off roof, runs on fiberglass channels. Very quickly I can open up and observe, and quickly close down again if the weather intervenes. A view inside the observatory, you can see the main scope, 300mm Newtonian reflector f5.3, also the Meade 80mm refractor, and if we come the other side you can see the 100mm refractor, which is a TAL, a Russian made refractor, and I mainly use that for as a guide scope when I'm doing photography. And then over here in this corner we can see the computer corner, and here I can sit when I'm taking long exposure pictures and operate the computer. Over here we can see a screen that I put up to stop any extraneous light coming in from street lamps or security lights. So when I'm actually trying to locate an object, I have quite perhaps an old-fashioned way of doing things. I haven't got go-to, so I use setting circles, and these are pretty accurate, and usually by setting the RA and the declination I can usually find the object pretty quickly. But if it is very faint, sometimes visually I'll use this filter, the UHC astronomic filter, and that helps just to lift the object out from the background, giving it greater contrast. I was able to do this with the Owl Nebula recently. First I couldn't see it at all, but then I was able to see it using this filter. And the other means of locating objects is I use Sky Atlas Epoch 2000, and I will look for the object on the map and then use a bright star fairly close by in order to jump across to the object. It also helps you to learn the star patterns around a given object. For example, there's the Owl Nebula just there, and you can see the different star patterns around the Owl Nebula. This is very helpful when you're trying to locate a faint object. The mount for the telescope is a Fuller Scopes Mark IV. It's quite an old mount, but very sturdy, and it supports a payload of 48 kilo. Tracking wise, it does pretty well. The worm gears are quite a good size, and I've been able to track quite successfully for up to 20 minutes when doing a long exposure picture on the Horsehead Nebula. And also I have the counterbalance, which can be adjusted according to the weight of the photographic equipment. And also I have here at the other end of the telescope a mechanism whereby I can add extra weights to balance it that way. So the main camera that I use for photography is a Canon 60DA. I find it a very useful camera for astrophotography. It's got the very useful feature of live view, which also enables you to focus on a reasonably bright star and get the focusing absolutely spot on. And there are many additional features that I can't really go into, but one of the features is that you can run it from the mains, so you haven't got to worry about the batteries running down. You notice that I've got a filter attachment here. This is made by Beda, a German company, and you can easily slide the filter into place and it'll lock into place usually. We'll just try again, shall we? And helps if you have it the right way around. And that's it. And that enables you to change filters without changing the focus. And it's a very, very useful appliance. I've tried a filter wheel in the past, but I find that this setup is so much better. When I'm taking images where I want a wide field of view, I'll use my Meade 80mm, but generally I'm using the SLR on the main telescope.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon Coop, and I've been a member of the Nottingham Astronomical Society for a few years now, and I thought today I'd like to talk to you about my favourite space documentaries and YouTube channels. To begin, I like to mention The Planets by Brian Cox. It was a documentary on, I think it was last year, and I found this documentary particularly interesting because I told you facts about the solar system you usually don't get to know. I also liked how the planets were animated in the show because it was a combination of the data that actually taken from space probes that had visited alongside scientific based artist impressions. And the show particularly focused on the missions that went to each of these planets. So like the Voyager flybys of Jupiter, Saturn, and Voyager 2 of Uranus and Neptune, as well as the Mars missions alongside a few of the missions that went into the inner solar system. Whilst I really did enjoy this series, I also would have preferred if there was some more like astronomy based or how the planets like interact as a whole or as a solar system. Or we could maybe do parallels to other planets and other solar systems, so exoplanets, and see how our solar system is similar but also differs from them. But overall, the series was brilliant. I'd like rate it like 9 out of 10. So another YouTube channel that I've been watching for a few years is SciShow Space. It was originally set up by John and Hank Green, and has now expanded to have several like narrators on the show. And it'd be mainly focused on like astronomy news or like a recent discovery they've been made, and they're usually between 5 and 7 minute videos on what's recent on the forefront of astronomy. For example, they would mention like new Hubble discoveries, also how different stars orbit around the black hole and how they've been modelled, and one of them found particularly interesting. However, the videos can be quite fast-paced and the narration's quite quick because the videos are quite short, so sometimes you have to rewatch the video to get all the information out of it. Also, SciShow Space links to its sister channel SciShow, so for any science enthusiasts in general, that's a really interesting one to watch. As well as Crash Course Astronomy. It's made by the same people, and it's a brilliant show to watch if you're beginning in astronomy or just have a general interest in astronomy as a whole subject. And it will give you an introduction to star types, planets, so I definitely recommend watching as well for anyone who wants to get into astronomy. PBS Space Time is a YouTube channel presented by Matt O'Dowd, who researches astronomy, and he produces videos based on concepts around black holes, special relativity, also some quantum physics in there. So I found that it was particularly interesting to learn about topics you wouldn't get to learn about through like most space books. And he explains it in a very good way, so he can introduce you to the maths, but the maths isn't key to understanding the topics. So I found that while PBS Space Time is very useful in learning new concepts, as well as mainly a lot of the underlying physics and some of the maths behind it, it sometimes requires a lot of previous understanding from other videos, so you have to watch a large amount from the beginning through the whole series. And also that it can be explained quite fast, so the pace of the video, sometimes you have to pause it, go back and rewatch it again. But I still think they're brilliant videos and the introduction to many much more complex topics in astronomy. One of the TV shows I've watched recently is Cosmos Possible Worlds, narrated by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I initially watched the original series back when I was in year 7, and it was a huge inspiration for me to go into astronomy. So when I heard there was a second series coming out, I was so excited to watch it. This one focuses on humanity's future in both space and on planet Earth, and also ties in many like science history, as well as interest in astronomy throughout. One particular analogy I like is the cosmic calendar, in which Neil deGrasse Tyson begins a journey on the 1st of January and explains how that was the Big Bang and how different events happen at different points throughout the cosmic year. The series is brilliantly animated, so there's like at one point where they animate what potential like planets, exoplanets could look like, how potential future colonies could look like, as well as parts of history you usually don't get to learn about during history lessons. But also the series is really engaging, so if you're fans of Brian Cox, I'd say definitely be fans of this show as well. I would like to see maybe perhaps more astronomy side in this show, because whilst it is very interesting to watch, the original series is more astronomy heavy, but overall the series is a brilliant series to watch. So those were 2 YouTube channels and 2 documentary series that I'd recommend to watch, especially during quarantine. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and thank you for watching.
Hello, my name is Sam. I'd like to welcome you to the observatory at my home in Keyworth. Right, now I've sent the wife back indoors, and I'll show you a few aspects of the dome, as I call it. Here it is in its situation in the back garden. It's actually at the bottom corner of the garden, around about 15 metres or so from the house, which I'll show you in a moment. It's quite a dark location, quite comfortable, and there's a good low horizon all around. Looking back from the dome to the house is roughly south-southwest from the dome. It's not too high. The apex of the roof has got an altitude of about 16 degrees, so Sirius just about clips the roof as it comes past each night during winter. If I pan slowly round, you can see I've got quite a low horizon, so this is roughly southeast, coming round to my house, which is just to the west of south, carrying on from there, going round to the west, and then the northwest where most of the light pollution from the city is, so I tend not to view very much in that direction. Over to the north, Polaris is just above here, then northeast, back to the dome itself. The lowest and darkest horizon is over to the southeast. I'm afraid the hedge appears to be getting a bit in the way, but it doesn't really show the view from the dome. It's possible to get down to an altitude of 3 degrees, so it is possible to see very low-lying objects like the Messier objects in Sagittarius, or indeed Fomalhaut each September. Here's a closer view of the dome, which I've now had for 13 years, so it's not quite as shiny as new, and it's used as a target by the local birds. It's a glass fibre dome which I bought as a kit from Pulsar Observatories, and you can see it's mounted on a concrete base. It's important to stress how important it is to have a firm concrete base. Simply putting it on paving flags will not do. You have to have at least 8 inches depth of concrete, and preferably a bit deeper in the middle where the telescope is going to be mounted. I've now opened up the dome so you can see the telescope. It's a Celestron 11-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain mounted on an altazimuth fork mount. See how compact the mounting is. It's plumb in the centre of the dome, and there's plenty of room to move around it. The scope is permanently mounted on a steel pier, which is absolutely rock steady. I definitely recommend this as a way to install your scope. So the telescope is always ready for use, it's always aligned, and I can be viewing within 5 minutes of deciding that I want to look at something. And looking a bit closer, you'll see the telescope's hand control and a dew shield with a dew strip underneath. I don't use a dew strip controller, I just run it at full power off a car battery. And I've got 2 finders on the scope. There's a Telrad unit power finder and a Stellarview right angle finder with an illuminator. There are various mod cons in the observatory. Here's a side table where I put my eyepiece bag and bits and pieces, and a radio controlled clock, an accessory tray underneath the scope, and over here a star chart on the wall, which I do use a great deal to find interesting objects to look at each night. Here's the car battery that I mentioned earlier. I've equipped it with a few Euro plugs for connecting various things like a dew strip and a hairdryer. Also note that the floor of the dome is carpeted, and this has come in useful on at least a couple of occasions when I've accidentally dropped an expensive eyepiece onto it, and the eyepiece has survived unscathed. Here's a pair of steps for when I need to view an object that's low down in the sky and I haven't got quite enough height to reach the eyepiece. Here's my eyepiece bag. I've got 3 main eyepieces, a 12mm Teleview Delos, which is very good for planetary viewing and is also a very good all-round eyepiece, a 22mm Teleview Nagler with a very wide field of view, 82 degrees, and a 42mm Vixen Lanthanum. Also in there are various filters, including coloured filters, light pollution filters, and a moon filter. You might well ask what's involved in setting up an observatory. Well, first of all, you've got to have somewhere to put it. It helps also to have a tolerant spouse and neighbours. You've got to have the equipment to put in it, although that might come later. And of course you should be willing to spend the money that's involved. Talking of money, suppose you already have a telescope, a mount, tripod, eyepieces and all the rest of the equipment. If you then think, rather than lugging all of that out each night, you'd rather have an observatory all ready to observe each night, you're talking about £5,000 or so to buy the observatory, install it, equip it, and make sure you have things like a steel pier. And I would definitely say it's worth every penny, even if you're just a visual observer like me rather than an imager. It is a great asset to have an observatory always there, that is always ready to go, and you can be ready to view at a moment's notice. It's relatively comfortable. Okay, it's going to be cold on a cold winter's night, but the dome will keep the wind off, it keeps stray light off, and everything's there. It's a hobby shed, if you like, always ready for your use. Go for it, it's worth every penny. I hope you've enjoyed the tour of my observatory, and I'll be happy to welcome visitors from this society at any reasonable time of day or night. And here is my email address where you can contact me.
Good evening, I'm James Dawson, and this is some video and some stills of the moon I undertook the other night on the 2nd of May at about 9 PM in my garden. The moon was about 9.5 days old and about 72% illuminated. So this is the setup. This is my AZ-EQ6 mount with a Celestron C11, and I've got a star diagonal here and a Canon 6D camera on the back with 2 battery grip at the bottom. I'd have to take my glasses off to look at anything nearby. This bucket is for all the electronics. So this is a awful picture I took of the moon on that evening. And we can annotate it a bit, and you can see north is up, the northern pole's up here, southern pole here, east and then west. So these are some of the features. Clavius down here, one of the oldest craters on the moon, probably about 4 billion years old, whilst the moon itself is only about 4.5 billion years old. Mare Imbrium, Plato, my favourite crater, and then the Sea of Tranquility here, which is about here where Apollo 11 landed. So we're going to look at that in a bit more detail. So the image here is a real recording, real time, of the seeing through my Canon 6D and a 2x Barlow. And you can see the image is shaking as though it's looking through heat, and that is the atmospheric seeing. And there's an arc of light here, which I'm sorry is an internal reflection from probably the Barlow. So we're moving up from the southern pole, up along the terminator, which is this line between day and night on the moon. Here you can see crater Copernicus. It's a relatively young crater. Hasn't been eroded. This is the Apennine mountain range and the Alps, and this is Mare Imbrium, and you might just be able to see here a prominence. This is a prominence of the Bay of Rainbows, and here's Plato, that lovely smooth large crater, and this is Mare Frigoris, the cold sea, and here we are now at the northern pole of the moon, and coming back down again the Apennines, and that's gone off. So now we're going to look even closer with a planetary camera called an ASI ZWO-224. And again we're at the southern pole. Here you can see Clavius. I'm going to move north, and this crater here is now Tycho. Doesn't look very prominent in this phase of the moon. At other phases it looks much more impressive with a giant ray structure. So we're moving into Mare Nubium, big flat plain. There's a lot of ghost craters here. You can just see outlines of rings, but they don't look like full formed craters. They've are quite old, and they filled up with lava in a subsequent event. Here again you can see Copernicus, and you can see the seeing shimmering away, and the features on the lunar surface seem to come and go out of focus, and that is the effect of the atmosphere predominantly in the Earth, and also some issues with my telescope I expect. These are the Carpathian Mountains. Lots of the mountains on the moon have a similar name to that on Earth. This is Mare Imbrium, a big impact basin which filled with lava. And again here we can see that prominence on the eastern side of the Bay of Rainbows, and that prominence is I've forgotten it. Laplace. This is the Montes Recta, straight mountains, and these are the Tenerife Mountains, and this little thing is Pico Mons, and this is again Plato, big crater which is filled with lava. It's got a lovely flat floor. These are the lunar Alps, and this structure here is the Alpine Valley, and there again is Mare Frigoris at the top. So we were up here. Now this is an image I managed to obtain on that evening from some of the data. Again you can see Clavius here, very obvious large crater on the southern pole, near the southern pole, and you can see this ring of sort of an arch of craterlets inside the crater. And here we've got Tycho, again looks very unassuming in this phase of the moon. Now I've got a similar image I took of, I'll just move myself, of Clavius in 2016, a very similar phase of the moon actually, but I had better seeing and probably more patience. And here's the image I obtained of Plato on Saturday night when I did this video, and again it's not great. The focus is out and the seeing was poor. But you can make out this big circular crater with a flat floor, and here's the floor of the Mare Imbrium, very smooth, and you can see these wrinkle ridges, and you can see the Tenerife Mountains and Pico Mons. And again, here's another image I did of Plato in 2016, but it's much better. You can look, if you look closely, you can see craterlets within inside the floor of Plato. And you can also see the Alpine Valley here, and some more adjacent craters. So the moon is wonderful just to look at or to image. It's always there in one form or another. Best not to look at full moon when you've got a crescent or half moon, and you can look down the line between day and night on the lunar surface. It's a really lovely thing. So do get out there and have a look at it. Got plenty of books on the in the library on it. Right, that's good. Thank you to all our presenters and to the neighbour's dog for barking. I really enjoyed all those clips. Was very envious of all those home observatories, which I don't have, like many others. It's just a case of dragging my kit into the garden, which is a limiting step. And as David Buxton said, hobbies, it's got to be fun. And sometimes when you're dragging all that stuff into the garden and then it's cloudy and you have to drag it all back again, it's not much fun. So I can see Lee's appeared.
Evening.
So have we got any questions? Julian said some top videos there, everyone. Fascinating. Good. But we don't have any questions. How envious are you of all those observatories, Lee?
Just a little bit.
So Rhiannon's asked something. Is there a recommendation for stacking software on computers to stack images from cameras? So I can talk about the moon and planets. Lee, will you be able to say something about deep sky objects for that? So the answer is yes. There's lots of free software out there, Rhiannon, for stacking. For moon and planets, the two commonest ones used are Registacks. I think it's Registack 6.1 now. And then there's AutoStackert 2. That's got an exclamation mark. Oh, we're getting a picture of Registacks. That must be Richard doing something. Or is that you, Lee? Where's that image come from?
That's from Richard.
It's Richard is doing something, yes. So Registacks and AutoStackert are both very good. They can either take videos, which it breaks down into individual frames, and then the software sorts out the best quality frames, aligns the target, and then you can stack them. And generally, whichever software you use, you then have to put it back into Registacks and do something called adjust the wavelets. But we can easily do a short session on that in the future. So that's for the moon and the planets. Lee, do you want to talk about deep sky objects?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for deep sky, you probably want to be looking at Deep Sky Stacker to begin with. That one's free. It's getting on a bit. It's just starting to show its age a bit, so it won't stack really big raw images. But again, we'll have there's a few newer packages out there. There we go, Deep Sky Stacker, and we can do a run through of the process that you go through to get an image.
So, Rhiannon, if you get a clear night, do collect some data, either lots of stills or some video at the highest quality possible, and then we will think about doing another talk on that, and then you can process that subsequently. So that's good. Right, what else has been said? Herbal said, very interesting talks. Yes, and thank you, Herbal, for your talk. That was great as well. Andrew, great videos and equipment. Need to start saving up lots. It depends what you want to do. You can do a fair amount with not a lot of money. There's a lot of things you can enjoy with binoculars or a small telescope. So that's, again, Lee, what was your first telescope in recent years?
My first telescope was a 150mm Newtonian on a manual mount.
Yeah.
Got quite a lot out of that, yeah.
And you did a bit of basic imaging with that as well, didn't you?
Yeah, put DSLR onto it with a very cheap adapter, and got some reasonable images.
Yeah. So you don't have to break the bank to observe an image. Rob said, thanks, everyone. Gareth, thank you. He's got MV2 for an observatory. Shirley was happy, loved the tour of the moon. That's good. And yeah, fab observatories. So Herbal's asked a question. What are the best filters when taking photographs? Lee, are you happy to have a go at this one?
Yeah, I suppose. Well, it depends what you're trying to image, really. If it's planetary, then some basic coloured filters would get you going. If you're looking at sort of deep sky stuff, you probably want to look at getting a hydrogen alpha filter, and that'll get you the deep reds that's in nebula. You can get one of those. You can get those for DSLRs as well as the high-end CCDs.
But with HA filters, would need to make sure your camera was sensitive to HA.
Indeed, yeah. So sometimes you probably want to make sure that you've got a good camera or you've had it modified.
Yeah. So that would probably be a mono camera, wouldn't it, without the Bayer matrix?
Yeah, ideally.
So yeah, and is there what's the shortest exposures you could do for HA? Thinking about tracking and guiding.
Yeah, you want to start getting at least about 5 minutes, ideally, unless it's a really bright object.
Right.
Something like the Orion Nebula, you'd be able to capture some detail from. But really longer the better.
Yeah. But there's lots of light pollution filters out there, aren't there?
Yes. If you look on most of the vendors, plenty of light pollution filters, not as useful as they used to be, unfortunately. When we had sodium streetlights, it was quite easy to filter that out. But now we've got broadband LEDs. It's difficult to get rid of that sky glow. They are better, though. You know, they all point down to the pavement rather than shining across the sky.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't get that definite cut that you would with an old-fashioned filter.
Okay.
But a UHC filter is probably what you want to look at. That will cut out a lot of the standard stuff that'll spoil your images.
Now, Gareth took a filter up to the observatory once, and we did visual using it, and that could have been a UHC filter. If Gareth's still around, maybe he can say what it was. And that actually did that seemed to cut out some sky glow and bring forwards a faint nebula. I can't even, wild duck nebula, wild duck cluster. I can't remember what it was. We'll have to find out from Gareth. I'll ask. I'm making a list of jobs. I'm able to download FITS images. Do you know whether there are free software for manipulating these? So there's a FITS Liberator package, which is a free bit of software which allows you to convert FITS to TIFFs. Is that what, Lee? Am I right?
Yes, I'd recommend that one. Yeah, that's quite useful.
So Nick Samanik told us about that. FITS Liberator. So you're not actually going to manipulate the FIT file, you'll just convert it to a TIFF, which is a minimal loss conversion. FITS Liberator. Richard, you're on the ball tonight with the software.
Yeah, sorry the image isn't any good. I think it's Jupiter, but massively overexposed.
I'm surprised you've got FITS Liberator on your laptop. Right then. Okay. So Stuart, I hope that's all right. Do put another message if you need more information. Julian, you can practice stacking by getting images from Hubble and Juno, and so free on the internet. Yes, Julian, I need you to write something about where you can get this data from for the journal. I know it's always giving you jobs. Roy will probably want things for this journal within a week, maybe less. Oh yeah, within a week, I suspect. So if you've got chance, you could just scribble down where people can access this data, because I'd even like to have a go at stacking some Hubble data. Chris Snedden, hello Chris, we're missing your cakes. Thanks you all. Getting to know each other in a different way during lockdown, yes. Julian's missing coffee and biscuits, yeah. We think they're being stockpiled at the president's house, so once lockdown's over, we're all going to go round to John's and hope he hasn't scoffed all the biscuits. Shirley's happy, cake. Julian will do something for the journal. There you are, Roy. A beginner's talk on all of this for dummies would be fab for Shirley. I don't know what a beginner's talk on what, but yes, we can just tell us what you want and Stuart's happy. That's good. What else did I write down? No, jealous of observatories. No, I haven't written anything else down. So if anyone else has got any comments or things you want us to talk about in the future, do say so. Richard, did you have Observatory Envy tonight?
Yeah, it's a pain for us with the telescopes the size of the C11. It's not much fun lugging that out. I think there's the correlation between size of telescope and how much it actually get used. So the bigger the scope, the less you use it. I think definitely holds true.
Is this the time I make the announcement of what I've just bought? I've just bought a C14, and goodness only knows why. We'll see what happens with that. Roy said June deadline is Monday the 25th of May. There you are, Julian. You've got 4 days to submit something. And Shirley wants stacking and photography. Yeah, well, it sounds like that's what we need to do. Have we got a theme for June's plum tree? Lee or Richard? No. So that's what we'll do then. Gareth is into stacking and photography too. So we note that down. That's what the topic will be. Rob Bush has retracted a message. Goodness only knows what that was. Rob, send it again if you can. So that's been about an hour. Nothing else seems to be coming in. I hope you're all well. And I think that's probably about time to wrap it up, Richard. Thank you, Lee. Thank you to all our contributors. And drop us an email if there's anything you want or anything you want to know and you haven't been able to use chat. That's fine. And we'll aim to get back to you. So thank you and good night.
Well, good night all. Just a quick reminder that the next live meeting is Professor Ian Morrison, and he's doing a talk on the wonder of the southern sky, and that's on Thursday, the 4th of June, same time, 8 p.m. So hopefully see you all there.